Can you imagine the sun disappearing for 18 months straight? A thick, impenetrable fog covering the greater part of 3 continents? A lack of shadows all around on account of the feeble light? This was exactly what many experienced during 536 CE. Welcome to History Bazaar. Today we're talking about what happened in the year 536 and why it's dubbed as the worst time to be alive. But first, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. For ages, the remarks of writers living through 536 CE were treated as sheer exaggerations. Scholars and academics didn't take seriously the fantastical stories about the year without light. Contemporary comments, like that of Cassiodorus, were dismissed as overly doom-laden. But recently, climatologists have been cooperating with archaeologists to uncover an increasingly bleak picture of 536 in the subsequent years. Research into historical tree rings and ice cores more or less confirms the gloomy tales written down during this era. We now probably know more about the causes of this darkness than the people living back then. As it happened, 536 was a time of unusual volcanic activity. Scientists found significant sulfate deposits in layers of ice dating back to this period. Several culprits stand accused: the Krakatoa in modern Indonesia, Rabaul in Papua New Guinea, or other volcanoes in North America or Iceland. It's beyond possible that instead of one, a combination of these volcanoes erupted in or near 536. In any case, a large amount of volcanic material entered the atmosphere and obscured the sunlight for months on end. This phenomenon is called a volcanic winter, and has happened several times throughout history. 536 was probably the worst volcanic winter to live through. The ash cloud obscuring the sun had immediate consequences on living conditions everywhere. Early medieval economies relied heavily on sustenance agriculture, smaller-scale farms to provide for a couple of families at most. In most civilizations at that time, there was a lack of large storage facilities for food. People produced their immediate necessities and little else. This economic order was highly vulnerable to catastrophes such as the 536 volcano eruption. For starters, summer temperatures dropped by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius, starting the coldest decade of the past 2 millennia. If 2.5 degrees doesn't sound like a whole lot, recall how modern governments are struggling to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Contemporaries describe the near-instant global cooling of 536 as seasons jumbled up together. Snow fell in August in China. Droughts hit Peru in full force. Ireland fell into immediate famine. Frost set in during harvest season, causing the apples to go sour. Soon after, widespread crop failure deprived many families of food. A failure of bread is a common remark in many annals covering these years. In Scandinavia, Viking noblemen dumped hoards of gold into ponds and streams to appease the gods. The events of 536 may have even inspired the Ragnarok legend, foretelling the death of the gods amidst numerous natural disasters. In any case, villages and empires across the globe were hit by the consequences of a sudden drop in temperature. As if one volcanic eruption wasn't enough, more took place over the following years. In 539 or 540, a cataclysmic eruption occurred, possibly in El Salvador. Summer temperatures dropped by another whopping 2.7 degrees Celsius. Researchers think that the severe decline in temperature was a result of the volcanic material in the atmosphere creating a feedback loop by blocking the sun's rays. Temperatures declined worldwide. This caused more ocean water to freeze, leading to expanding ice sheets. These reflected even more sunlight, further cooling the planet. To make matters worse, A third great explosion happened in 547. Taken together, these effects compounded to such a severe drop in global temperatures that climatologists label the 6th and 7th century CE as the Late Little Antique Ice Age, a century-long global temperature decline. At first, the empires of the 6th century fared a little better than the sustenance farms and small holdings elsewhere. The imperial Chinese civilizations were somewhat able to store food centrally in granaries and distribute it to their hardest-hit provinces. Meanwhile, inhabitants of the Byzantine capital of Constantinople eerily marveled that they could see no shadows of our bodies at noon. But then, Byzantine and the Persian empires in particular were hit by another calamity that truly made the mid-6th century the worst time to be alive. While many people were already struggling to get by as a result of the bad harvest caused by the Volcanic Winter, a plague broke out in Byzantine Egypt, with a major part of the population on or over the edge of dearth and famine. The pestilence found a fertile breeding ground here. It spread rapidly to the Persian heartland and the Byzantine capital. The two empires suffered greatly under this first great plague pandemic of the Old World. Even the Byzantine Emperor Justinian got infected, giving the epidemic its name of Justinian's Plague. Some scholars estimate that a quarter of the population in the region died during this outbreak, although other scientists have proposed far lower numbers. Recently, evidence also surfaced that the Justinian plague spread far beyond the imperial realms, with Anglo-Saxon human remains from the 6th century having contracted the disease. At any rate, this was a full-scale calamity. At the start of the worst year ever, 536 CE, Emperor Justinian just launched his great offensive into Italy to reconquer the western parts of the empire, which had fallen to the Goths. Volcanic Winter or no, his star general Belisarius managed to eject them from Neapolis and Rome before the year was out. As the Goths quickly gave way at first, perhaps the more superstitious among their ranks were frightened by the ominous portent accompanying Belarius' landing in Italy, the darkening of the sun. Either way, the subsequent disasters turned the tide of the war. While Justinian's plague devastated and depopulated large parts of the Byzantine Empire, the Goths made the most of a bad situation and launched a counteroffensive that successfully lasted for over a decade. After the pandemic abated, however, the Byzantines reinforced their positions and finally conquered the entire peninsula. Although triumphant, this victory came at a great cost. Because of its setback by pestilence, the conflict, then named the Gothic War, lasted for nearly 20 years, sapping the empire of crucial resources, while it had also had to deal with bad harvests on account of the volcanic winter. What's more, the unfriendly climate hit globally, putting entire tribes on the move on most of the Byzantine borders. Now, new tribal confederations were looking to occupy the fertile lands of the Byzantine Empire, perhaps spurred on by disappointing agricultural results in their homeland because of the volcanic winter. The early medieval era has often been described as the Dark Ages. While this terminology is fortunately no longer in use by most historians, it seems the events of 536 and the subsequent years might somewhat justify this nomenclature. As a result of several major volcanic eruptions, even contemporaries would have described the period as dark in a literal sense. Some historians do call the 6th and 7th century CE the Dark Ages, not because of any presupposed ignorance, but for a simple lack of sources, making the era a difficult period to shed academic light on. There were clear causes for people being busy with other things other than chronicling. Rather than experience an overall fall of civilization, they had to deal with a volcanic winter and a lot of warfare. The Byzantine government somehow thought the time was right for its Gothic War and managed to sustain the conflict for 2 decades and win it. However, Of all years, 536 CE itself does seem to have been the worst year ever, with weather distortions on every continent and global food supplies depleting within the span of a season. We hope you enjoyed another episode of History Bazaar. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the fastest growing history channel on YouTube.